Hello,
Hi, Amy.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well. Apologize to anybody if you got kicked out. I think there was a technical difficulty, and I don't know if it affected just me or other people, but I think we're back in business.
That may have been because I was in another meeting right up until just before this one.
Well, and so was I, and I didn't realize that you can be logged you can go to different meetings, but as long as you're not a host.
Right,
So
exactly.
I didn't realize that I was a host on a different meeting. So anyway,
Yep,
here we are.
yep, we are. All right, let's see. And I'm just looking at the list of who's expected. It looks like there's quite a few, so I think we should give it another minute or two. But
That's fine.
that's up to you, Amy. I will defer to your expertise on admissions.
Uh-oh, we're all in trouble now. I've got plenty of things that I feel qualified to speak on. I'm not sure Zoom is the one.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, I don't, if it's okay with everyone, if it won't interfere too much with your planning, I think it's okay to give another minute. Um, I believe Jeff said that we are trying to record this. So just to get
Yes.
everybody the heads up that you're very welcome to turn your video on. We would love to see you and interact with you. If you're not comfortable, that's perfectly acceptable.
Yep, yep. Okay. Well, what do you think? Why don't I get started, and if people come
Sure,
in, they can ask questions.
absolutely. I think
Um,
that's totally fine.
okay, and I was thinking, so in terms of how long we're aiming to go for, I'm here until 1. I'm happy to just hang out and answer questions as long as people have. Um, I myself am planning to talk for maybe 10 or 15 minutes just to give you all an overview. So let me get started. Welcome, first of all, thanks to everybody, and congratulations on being accepted to law school. We're all extremely excited to meet you, to welcome you to Albany Law School. Um, let me, just 1 second, I can fix the, oh, Amy already fixed the dinging. Okay, good. So we're all extremely excited to have you here, and I want to be helpful to all of you in whatever way I can. Let me talk a little bit. Just first, I'll tell you who I am, then I'll tell you about the Government Law Center and what we do, and then I'll talk a little bit about our connections to the Albany Law School community in the world of government and the world of government itself. So my name's Ava Ayers. I am a professor at Albany Law School. I teach classes on government and government law. I'm in fact, Zoom is fun. I'm going to add professor to my name there so you can remember which one I am. I am also the director of the Government Law Center, which I'll talk about in a minute. Before I was at the law school, I was a senior assistant solicitor general in the office of the New York State Solicitor General, which is the state appellate law bureau that represents the government in all matters. And before that, I clerked for then Judge Sonia Sotomayor on the Second Circuit, the Federal Appellate Court, and then for a judge named Jerry Lynch on the trial court in Manhattan. I have a background, I suppose, in human rights before college. That was my interest before law school. And by the time I was through with law school, I knew that I was really passionate about government because as somebody who had worked in the human rights field, my time in law school, where I interned for the US State Department and the US Senate, taught me that being inside government gives you pretty incredible opportunities to make a difference, to impact the decisions that are being made. So by the end of law school, I decided I want to go into government, and I did. But I always dreamed of being a professor because I love working with students and teaching. We've been, all of us, spending a lot of time on the faculty working with students in small groups, talking to students one-on-one to make sure that everybody is still thriving educationally, professionally, and to the extent we can in other ways during this shutdown. And I think we are. I mean, in some ways, this is the best time for learning that I've experienced as a professor at the law school, some of the students have extraordinary challenges, and they've been facing those challenges admirably. But I think that the law school as a community has really risen to those challenges, and I'm proud to be a part of that. So let me tell you a little bit about the Government Law Center. We are sort of like a small think tank embedded in the law school, except think tank suggests you're shut away from the world thinking your brilliant thoughts in the ivory tower, and that's not at all what we do. We have a three-pronged mission. The three prongs are students, research, and community. What I mean by that is part of our work at the Government Law Center is mentoring students, helping students who might be interested in government explore that interest, and also helping them grow into extraordinary lawyers who are going to serve the public extraordinarily well. Part of our mission is doing research that benefits people in government, policymakers, who want to understand the law better than they do. We're nonpartisan, we don't do advocacy, we're a research and education and training organization. So that means we do publications on a number of issues. I'll talk about some of those. We do educational events. This week, for example, we did a training on voting during the COVID-19 shutdown, where we had 200 people on a webinar. Some of those were people from New York State agencies, from the legislature, practicing lawyers. We actually had the head of one of the state agencies on the line during that, which was cool. And the goal is really, again, to explain the law to people, to understand the choices that policymakers have to make. And our events are focused at policymakers, but the public is certainly welcome, and we like to think that those events benefit the public as well. So that's the research part of our mission. And then in terms of community, Albany Law School has always prided itself on its connections to government. We're the only law school in the state's capital, and that gives us an extraordinary position in terms of our ability to get students involved in that world, and also in terms of our ability to help that world of policymakers benefit from the law school and from what we have here. So when I say that Albany Law School has a special connection, that's just not just a matter of geography. It's also a question of personalities and community. The Government Law Center sees as part of its mission building that connection through community outreach, we have an advisory board, which is distinguished lawyers in public service or who work on government, all of whom are helping our students get connected to that world. And we do training programs and community building programs to develop a sense of community on campus for students who might be interested in government. So those are the three parts of our mission. Let me now tell you a little bit about the specific kinds of work that we do to advance that mission, to give you a sense of what all of this actually looks like in practice. So there are 8 of us at the Government Law Center, 8 staff, 4 lawyers and 4 non-lawyers. And we are working on several different programs at any one time. Government Law Center as a name gives you a lot of flexibility for what issues you want to work on, right? Some people, so the Government Law Center has been around for 40 years. I'm the latest in a long line of directors of the Government Law Center. I've been here for 3 years and plan to be around for a while longer yet. Some of our directors have had interests and expertise in specific areas, and they've brought that expertise in. And so some of our projects reflect the history of the center and the community and connections and expertise that the center has built, thanks to that succession of directors who've gone through. So we have a program, for example, on immigration, which I brought in with me. State and local governments have a profoundly important role to play in immigration issues, from the debate over sanctuary cities to debates about in-state tuition for undocumented people, to questions about driver's licenses and who should be eligible for those. All of those issues are state and local government decisions where, to make those decisions well, you have to understand immigration law, and immigration law is extremely difficult to understand. It's very complicated. And if you're in a state government is one thing, right? State government, most agencies have lawyers on staff. Imagine you're in a rural town and you've been elected to a leadership position in that town, and your constituents want you to become a, quote, sanctuary. How do you find out what that means? What's legal and what the questions are? So our role is not to urge anybody to become a sanctuary or not become a sanctuary. It's just to help people understand the choices that are available to them and the legal consequences of those decisions. And so, like, we get calls from a county sheriff who's interested in what the law is about prisoners in detention when ICE wants to ask questions about them. We get a call from a city council member who's thinking of proposing a bill on sanctuary and wants some thoughts on what other towns have done. It's really exciting work, and students get to be involved in all of that. When we have interesting meetings, we try to bring students along. And the publications that we produce, which are another really important part of our work, are co-written by students. So right now I have a student working on updating our explainer, that is a short publication that explains the current litigation over the green light law, the law that gives driver's licenses to undocumented people. She's doing lots of research on what those cases involve, and we're going to put out a short, convenient reference document to explain it. It's a chance for the students to grow as writers, to learn about the issue, and also to work in a professional setting at the Government Law Center where they're learning to be comfortable in a workplace that deals with policy, because lawyers don't always work with policy. Lawyers often do direct services work where you're working with a client. But if you're in government, you have to be familiar with a different kind of practice. So we aim to give students experience with that as well. We also have a program on rural communities where we're working on access to justice in rural communities. It can be very difficult to find a lawyer and access legal services if you are living in a rural community. I would say that the challenges facing rural communities right now obviously have a lot to do with the COVID-19 crisis and the way it's affecting small businesses. So we're doing some work on helping people connect with those resources. We're also doing a program on aging and disability law, which has been part of the Government Law Center for a long time, helping governments think about how policies affect the elderly, people with disabilities. Right now, we're particularly focusing on guardianship proceedings. What happens when somebody wants to establish a guardianship for someone? New York State's laws are extremely complicated, and we've been bringing together roundtables of policymakers, experts, people who know this field to try to help them reach a consensus on how to make those laws work better. I think it's incredibly important. When I talk about the Government Law Center doing research to help policymakers, what I mean is help policymakers serve their communities better. So the aging and disability community is really important, and we have in New York State an alphabet soup of different agencies. There are at least 12 that deal with those populations. So helping everybody navigate that is so important. We also have a special arrangement with the city of Albany where we manage their police oversight board. So this is unique as far as I know among law schools. We staff it. We have a person on our staff whose job it is to run the board. The board is 9 civilians who oversee investigations into allegations of police misconduct, and our job is to help them get their cases investigated, figured out, and voted on, and to help the public understand their work. It's a really exciting project. Oversight of police is obviously something with incredible importance nationally, and we're working on the front lines, and students help with that work. So students go to board meetings, help the board figure out what questions they need answered, and in some cases make policy proposals for changes to the way the board does their business. One thing that's really exciting about local government is that you can see change happen very fast. So we noticed last year that the name of the board was the Citizens Police Review Board. We noticed that that's a problem because the board doesn't just serve citizens, it also serves non-citizens. If you're here and you don't have citizenship and you're harassed by the police, you still have the right to file a complaint. We pointed this out. And again, we're not advocating anything, we're bringing issues to policymakers. It was changed immediately. It's very satisfying for students to see change happen concretely and immediately on a project that they've worked on. So we were proud of that. And finally, we have an emerging issues program. There's other programs I can talk about too. We also do some great work on state constitutional law, which I just love so much, especially right now. Can you do elections all absentee ballot? Is that constitutional in New York? We're working on that question. But we also have an emerging issues program where we're free to touch on any issue that seems relevant and in the news or on the minds of policymakers. And that's why we do our Anderson seminar series, which is every spring, usually held inside the state capitol itself. Obviously, right now we're not inside the state capitol because our audience would be prohibited by law from attending the event. But we were doing them online. But every normal year, we're inside the capitol, and it's a great opportunity for students to learn about new issues. We do everything. We've done something on law of gun control and the SAFE Act. We've done things on climate change, immigration. Sometimes they are relevant to our programs. Voting. Our next session is going to be on the gig economy and how independent contractors or people who work for organizations like Uber, Lyft, Postmates, et cetera, how those workers are affected by the COVID-19 shutdown. And again, that's a really exciting opportunity for students to come in and get involved with things. So I know there's been some interest in various topics here. So like I didn't mention education law, for example, but if you're interested in education law, the Government Law Center can get involved in that. And even if we're not going to start doing a staff project on that, we have people on our advisory board who can help you get connected. So let me talk now about how students get involved in all this, because I think that's obviously it's important to you. It's also important to me. So a couple of things. The Government Law Center runs several programs for Albany Law School students that are worth knowing about. One is the Government Law Center Fellowship, which is a three-year mentoring program that you can apply for up until the first week of classes. So there's plenty of time. We wanted to make sure that nobody misses a chance to apply for it. And in that program, the first year, it's informal mentoring to help people decide whether public service is really right for them. So we ask the students, what areas of law are you interested in? And if somebody says, so this month, for example, we brought in 3 guest speakers. People said they wanted to learn more about government ethics. So we brought in the head lawyer for JCOPE, the main New York State government ethics agency. People said they were interested in representing people with disabilities. So we brought in our director of an agency called MHLS, Mental Hygiene Legal Services. The word mental hygiene is horrifically outdated, but that's what happens when there are very old laws. That's a long story. But it's her job to be appointed by the court to represent people who are deemed incapable of representing themselves. So she talked to the students about that. And we also brought in somebody who was interested in public authorities, which if you don't know what they are, they're a fascinating sort of quasi-government entity. It's basically like a company formed by the government so it can take out loans without following the usual procedures that governments follow. And if that sounds like a giant slush fund, you're not the only one who hears it that way, which is why you have an oversight office whose job it is to watch what the public authorities are doing. So we brought in the head of that oversight office. It's called the authorities budget office. We brought in the head of that office to talk to students, and they tend to be small groups because we don't require you to come to those. It's if you're interested in learning more about this institution, you come. So we have 5 to 10 students who come in and get a real chance to get to know these senior officials. And if you go to a bunch of these, as I recommend you do, you develop a chance to really understand what life in government is like, because you meet enough different people and you get to ask them about their career. So by the time you go to a job interview and you say you're interested in government, you can say really smart stuff about why, and you'll impress the interviewer because you know something. What I want to accomplish with the program is to make sure that nobody at Albany Law School fails to impress an interviewer because they didn't have an adequate chance to learn. Right? Some people come to law school already knowing a lot of people in government, right? Some of our students come already as employees. You will have colleagues in your first year who are working at the state legislature while they're taking classes, who are working for the governor's office while they're taking classes. All of that stuff is very normal. But if you're a student who doesn't have those resources, we want to make sure that you get up to speed and have the same advantages that everybody else does. So the Fellows Program helps us achieve that. In the second year, there's an academic component. If after your first year you decide you like government, you want to pursue government, that's great. We want to help you do that by making sure that you emerge from law school with the concepts and the understanding of law that you need. So we require a course on administrative law, which is agencies, state agencies. Every lawyer needs to know how federal, state, local agencies work, because most of American law is actually produced by agencies, not courts or legislatures, just by volume. They make more of it. So we teach you that. Then we also designed a special class called Law of Government, which I designed by interviewing a lot of employers in government and asking, what do our students need to know by the time they graduate that you're not seeing they know? And so we basically took their answers and made a curriculum out of it, made a syllabus out of it for this class. So it's things like, how does the legislative process work, right? Everybody's heard about the legislative budget, but how does it actually work? This is the most important single issue in state government and in federal government too. So we learn about how the federal government works, how it passes its budget, but also how it passes laws. What are local governments anyway, right? You all probably know that the federal government has roughly 3 branches. How many branches does a county government have, right? Even people who work in county government have trouble answering that question. But if you work anywhere in government, federal, state, local, you're going to come up into that question, and we're going to help you be ready for it. What about oversight and transparency? When you go into government, who's reading your emails? Sometimes the answer is literally anybody who wants to. And boy, does that change the way you do your practice. I hope. Also, who's looking over your shoulder to make sure you're doing the job right? In the state government, there are multiple commissions that do public ethics. You have to answer to them. There are inspectors general who might investigate you. You have to answer to them. There's the governor who may or may not have the power to swoop in and change your policy at will. There are criminal prosecutors who may or may not investigate you. There's the state attorney general's office, which has some oversight power. And there are more. Knowing all of that can often make the difference between good choices and bad choices in government. And you just don't get that in normal law school classes, so we put it in there. It's an extremely fun class. The criminal law prosecution lets me teach about all these elected officials who go to jail. What did they do? And how can you make sure that you, or if you go to advise a government official, don't do the same thing? They're really, really useful and also fascinating. Political corruption is just, it's fun. A lot of this is fun, but that's especially fun. Okay, so your second year as a fellow, you take classes, and of course those classes are open to anybody at the law school. So this is not like only something we do for fellows, right? And you continue to be invited to the informal events. And then in your third year, you do some experiential hands-on work in the policy space. Sometimes that means coming to do an internship with us at the Government Law Center. That's a great way to learn about doing policy work. But it also often means going out into a government agency, a federal agency, state, local, working for a think tank out there in the world that's doing policy issues, even working for a law firm that's doing lobbying on policy issues. All of that, you get some exposure to policy. And then you come back and you tell us and your colleagues what it was like. So your colleagues aren't just hearing from the guest speakers we bring in, they're hearing from other students about their experience, and they know who to contact. We have an incredible alumni network of people in government. Name any agency, there's an Albany Law alum who's working there who'd be happy to tell you about that agency. And so now that I've described the Fellows Program, I just want to end by talking about the resources that are available to everybody, because the Fellows Program is competitive. We get about 50 applications, and we choose 10 to 15 fellows every year. But that doesn't mean if you're not a fellow, you're not connected to government. On the contrary, the idea of the fellowship program is that that's a core around which we can build services that are available to the whole community of students at Albany Law School. So, the classes, the internships, the externship, all of that's available to anybody. And if you're interested in a particular issue, say you have a passion for criminal justice, let us know that. And if we're bringing in a speaker who comes from that area, you can come join us. These are not exclusive sessions. If there's a student who we can help, we're damn well going to help that student. I probably shouldn't say damn. I don't know if that's even a thing anymore. Okay, so in terms of the whole law school, I've gotten some questions about internships and externships. So let me just say a little bit about that. As many of you know, during your time in law school, it's very common to spend time working. Everybody, or almost everybody, does it over the summers between their years if they're on a 3-year JD schedule. but it's also very common for people to do externships or some other form of experiential placement during this semester. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that. There's all kinds of names that we have for those different ways, but what you need to know is you can do those for pay or for academic credit, and whatever arrangement is going to make the most sense, we'll be able to accommodate. So we have some students who are, so right now, for example, I have a student who's working for the state immigration agency. It's called the Office for New Americans, where they're reporting both to me periodically for check-ins and to the head lawyer for that agency doing policy work, and they're getting paid for it. We've made that possible. But if they had wanted to get academic credit instead, we could have done that. There's different paperwork, but what we care about most is what's the advantage to you. Of course, there has to be an available funding stream, but there usually is, in my experience, for students who come to me and want help arranging a placement with a government agency. We have really good relationships with so many of the agencies that if you're interested in a placement with them and they accept students, which most of I only know of one agency that doesn't take student interns, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. And if you're interested in that subject area, there are other agencies that we can find for you to work on. So the basic idea is you can do, it's called a field placement, externship, internship, whatever it's called. We help people set those up. We can help put you in contact with potential employers. And we can help you make sure that it's a useful experience, because the other part of working in a government agency or in a public interest entity, not-for-profit, lobbying, whatever, is you want to make sure that you're really learning while you're on the job, right? And so one of the things that's important about having a community that's connected is that I can tell you, or some of our alums that I can put you in touch with can tell you, yeah, if you go to the New York State Attorney General's office for an internship, which a lot of our students do, they're going to be a good supervision experience for you. They're going to give you meaningful work. They're going to give you meaningful feedback on the work, and you're going to get to know people there, all of which are so important for a good experience. I've had internships in my own career where I was just hanging out, reading the newspaper. They weren't using me and I wasn't learning much. It's really useful to be able to know the difference. So part of our work at the Government Law Center is helping make sure that those placements are valuable. So let me stop there. I see that we've been getting some questions, so let me take a look at some of those. So I see one question is it possible to do an externship through a government placement in the spring semester of the first year or the summer between the first and second year? Yes, to both of those. You can do I believe, I'd actually have to double check on the first year. A lot of students don't. A lot of students choose to focus on their academics during the first year, which is fine. But the summer between the first and second years, yes, in fact, government placements are very common during the summer. So I have students who go to DA's offices, who go to various state agencies, to the governor's office, to federal agencies, all during the first summer. And some of those are more or less competitive depending on where it is. But what's interesting is that what's competitive doesn't necessarily translate into what's a great learning experience. So, you know, what we try to do is help people find which of those agencies is going to be a better experience. I see another question is, are there internship, externship opportunities in the legislature or governor's office as well? Yes, absolutely. I had a student recently who spent many semesters interning in the governor's office and then went to work for them after graduation. We have a, let's see, in terms of the legislature, we have a multitude. I have one student right now three students who I know in the fellows program who are currently on staff at the legislature during their, so they're working part-time. And then internships are very common. The legislative calendar affects that a little bit. If you're thinking about the state legislature, it's true that, oh, excuse me 1 second. Evie, you need to sharpen a pencil? Okay, here, why don't you come around so everybody can see why. I'm really sorry. My daughters are doing their schoolwork. This is my daughter, Eve. Eve, say hi to everybody. She needs to sharpen a pencil, so you're gonna hear a sound for a minute. I'm sorry, but this is their only break in classes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. Well, this is their only time to draw. This is their lunch. Nice. Okay. All right. So as I was saying, yes, the legislature, very, very common, but the calendar affects it because the legislature, as you may know, if it's the state legislature, we're talking about very, very busy from January to April, and then again in May and June. Much quieter over the summer. The summer can be a great time for an internship because that's when everybody gets their policy proposals together. So it can be a really good time. But some of the legislators go home to their district offices. Most of them go home to their district offices during the summer. So you want to think about where you want to intern. And in that case, interning in the district might be better than interning in Albany. Right, and thanks, Amy, for that. So the first year curriculum, typically experiential opportunities begin in the first summer. So that's right. So usually you wouldn't be doing an externship in the second semester of your year, and I think that's a good policy. Okay, let's see. I see I have another question about the federal government, internships in the federal government. So yes, opportunities in the federal government, externships in DC, et cetera. Sure. So we do send people to the federal government. Obviously, being in Albany, we're better connected to the state government, but we certainly have connections there as well, and it's something the students are very interested in. My sense is that for a job, so for example, if you want to work on Capitol Hill in DC, that can be a challenging. Those are quite competitive placements, but they're certainly doable. We have students who intern on Capitol Hill in the federal legislature. We have students who intern in federal agencies, Department of Agriculture, EPA, housing. You know, the question there, I think, and as somebody, so I've worked in both the state and federal government, and something that I find, for whatever it's worth, a lot of students come to law school, as I did, determined to go into the federal government. I just figured, like, it's the top, so why wouldn't I want to go there? And so I worked in the State Department, and I worked on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee all during law school, and I also did a federal clerkship where I was interacting a lot with federal prosecutors and other federal officials. And I decided to go into the state instead because something I found was that you still get excellent lawyering. You have a much bigger impact in state government because the size of state government is smaller. And so a very common progression that I see from students during law school is they come in excited about federal government, as they should be, because federal government is terribly exciting. I teach it, so I'm very excited about the federal government. But as time goes on, they're more drawn towards state and local government because of the opportunities they have to make an impact there. And that's not to say it'll happen to you or to anybody in specific, just that it happened to me and it's happened to a lot of people that I know. But if you're interested in that, we have a great program in international law here at Albany. We have some professors. We have a class on war crimes that's very popular. We have a great professor, Alex Harrington, who deals with international environmental issues. So there's a lot of opportunities for all that. The Government Law Center has traditionally focused on state and local government, partly to distinguish ourselves. You know, I went to Georgetown, which is in DC, where the connections were all to the federal government. And something curious that I found is that the opportunities that I had in DC were wonderful and they were very exciting, but they were also, there wasn't the same sense of connection to the community that there is in Albany, which has a wonderful equalizing effect, I think, because we can help plug people in and make that community more open to everybody. Let's see, I see there's another question. Have Albany Law alumni been successful in applying for federal clerkship? Yes, to some extent. I think Mary Fitzpatrick from our Career Services Office could tell you more. I don't work directly on clerkship placements myself, but I know we have students place in federal district courts frequently, less frequently on federal appellate courts, but that's true for every law school. The placements that we most often get are, I think, on the New York State Court of Appeals. We usually have a student or two every year who gets a clerkship on the State Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State. And again, like, not to be pushing state government on anybody, but I clerked on the Second Circuit, which is the federal appellate court. And I've also practiced in the New York State Court of Appeals, which is the state highest appellate court. And the difference there is unbelievably exciting. In the federal system, the only court that can change the law, the precedents, is the US Supreme Court, right? And even at Georgetown, where I went, virtually nobody gets a US Supreme Court clerkship. It's really competitive. It's also really freaking small, right? There's just hardly any of them. The New York State Court of Appeals is also small, but they take Albany law grads all the time. They have the power to change the law. You get a Second Circuit clerkship, a federal appellate clerkship, you don't get that. They're bound with precedent, which means they're not doing the kind of reasoning that's really exciting. Where it's like, is this a good law? Should we make a change? They have that power. I show my class an oral argument in the State Court of Appeals as part of our admin law class. And I got the loveliest note from a student, like, I can't believe how exciting this is. I'm watching the oral argument. And it is, because when the court has the power to make a change, you as a lawyer, if you're arguing, have an opportunity to make a difference. You as a clerk, if you're clerking, have an opportunity to really affect things. So yeah, let's see. Another question is, would it be possible to do an externship in a New York State Senator's office? For example, an externship that focused on policy/legislation writing. Yeah, not just possible, it's very common. So a lot of the students that we send to the legislature work on policy and legislation writing. It's just something that, and then a lot of our graduates go into, there's a New York State Senate Fellowship Program, it's called, which is 9 months after you graduate and very commonly leads to a job in the legislature if you're interested in that. And that's not the only way that you can work on policy either. If you want to do an internship in the legislature, that's a great opportunity to work on policy. But there are also, for example, state agencies. Some of our interns at the Office for New Americans have drafted proposed legislation because agencies propose legislation too. So it's not unusual for a student who's interning at an agency to be asked, we need some policy proposals. Can you come up with some? I'm not kidding. They ask law students, we'd like to do some policy proposals, pitch us some ideas, and to draft those. So I do think that there's incredible opportunities, not just in government, although in government is wonderful. And it's a really good idea to take an internship in the legislature if you want to work in the legislature later, both because it'll get you great connections, but also because it'll give you a real meaningful experience where you can evaluate, is this right for me? Is this, a good thing for me? Let's see, I want to see, are there many students that take summer internships, externships in other state governments besides New York? Right, New York is the biggest one, but there certainly are others. I think that's part of what's exciting about state government, that there are so many of them. So yeah, if you're a student from California and you want to go work for an agency out there, Albany Law School doesn't have the same connections there that we have to Albany, but it's absolutely something we can help with. And all of these governments are looking for people. This isn't just something that they do to be nice to students. They need the help. They value the help. One question that I encourage you to think about is, are they paying? Because that's an issue. Right, many state government internships don't pay, which is a real problem. It's not just a problem in terms of how available it is for any individual person, but the disparity that it creates, right? Part of the reason governments are not as representative of the people as they should be is that to get an internship, if you're not paying, that means people with financial means are more likely to take the internship and thus more likely to get a job in government. So we've recognized that problem. We have a variety of summer funding options available for people who want to work in various kinds of public service. There's really a long list of different kinds of fellowships. So we really try to help students be able to take advantage of those opportunities. Let's see, and so I see another question, are there connections opportunities available with the Department of Education? Yes, and I'm excited that you asked that because that's one of my favorite state agencies. I worked with them a lot when I was in the state government, and I just think their counsel's office is extraordinary. The current Commissioner of Education, Shannon Tahoe, happens to be somebody I know very well. She and I worked closely together on cases in New York State when I was representing the Department of Education at the AG's office. Excuse me, and so I think not only is it a good place to work, but we have really good connections there. And there's just they also happen to have the most beautiful building in state government. I don't know if you all know this, but it's absolutely devastating, just visually. Let In fact, it's so pretty that for anybody who hasn't seen it, I just want to pull it up. I just adore this building, and going to visit is a wonderful experience. Right, while I'm talking, so yes, so the way you would do that is to ask what they need. And there are so many different parts of the Department of Education that you'd want to think a little bit about which issues you want to work on. Do you want to work, there it is. Is that not just a lovely building? Would you not love to go and be an intern there? It's facing the Capitol. There's a beautiful park there. From April to October, there are food courts with all kinds of different cuisines that people go and sit in the park and eat. So you can mingle in the park and get to know people from the legislature and all the various state agencies. It's just a lovely time. Within education, there's special education issues. There's education funding issues. There's secondary, post-secondary, K through 12 issues about Common Core. There's so many different things going on, and the counsel's office is going to be involved with all of those. So as somebody who teaches administrative law, learning to navigate those regulations, this is part of why we require our fellows in their second year to take administrative law. So you'll get to that internship if you choose to do it later. You'll know exactly what an agency is and how it works and what it means that you're looking at a regulation. And that's something that not all law students get, but we're going to strongly push you to do that if you tell us you're interested in public service, so you're ready. So, and I think that the advantage is that these agencies, the more we continue doing this, they know that's what it means when you've taken those classes. They know you're prepared. But I also don't want to suggest that you have to wait until your third year to do an internship with the Department of Education or an agency like that. It absolutely is available during the first summers, and we can put you in touch with people that we know, like I mentioned, or with alums who work in that office. Something very common that we facilitate for students is the informational interview. You're probably very familiar with this concept, but if you're not, I highly recommend you think about this. It's very common in government and in the legal profession for students to reach out to somebody to say, I'd love to know about the work that you do. Would you mind taking half an hour to tell me? And now with Zoom, it will take them precisely half an hour and not a minute longer out of their day, which is another way in which I think, strangely, this shutdown has made things work better and more smoothly. It's a better time to be in law school in some ways, because it's so easy for people to say yes to getting together with you. Every student has a Zoom account set up for them, so you can invite people to join you. And it just works. Okay, so now I'm sort of rambling off the question. I want to make sure, are there other things that people, oh great, another question is, what's a good class to take to help one decide if government or government policy work is a good fit? So I love this question because I think it's the kind of question that you should be asking yourselves. Very few people come into law school knowing exactly what they want to do. I certainly couldn't have answered the question on my first day of classes, do you want to go into government or not? I would have ran away in fear from anybody who asked me that question. There's this one dude in my first year orientation who they asked us, like, what do you want to do? And he raised his hand and he said, real estate, commercial real estate. We're like, I'm sorry, what? Like, how do you know with that level of certainty? But he did know. And today he's working in commercial real estate. And I think he's probably very happy. But except for that one guy, none of us knew. And none of us should have known. So, okay, so what's a good class to take? I mean, that's part of the idea of the law of government class that I teach. We offer it in the first semester of your second year. And we bring in guest speakers from various entities. We had the state budget director, who's widely considered the most powerful man in state government, except for Governor Cuomo, because he controls the state budget. So he came in to talk to us about how government works. You not only get a sense of what he does, but also his vibe, right? I don't know how else to say it besides a vibe, right? There's a very different sense of what people are like. And so when you talk about deciding whether government is a good fit, part of that question is, what about this community? Is that community going to be a good fit? Is that the kind of place I want to be? I think, fortunately, law students now know that it's okay to ask the question, do I feel right about taking this job? It's not just what's, quote, prestigious. It's not, it's not what looks good on paper. It's, where am I going to find a life for myself that's rewarding, where I feel proud of the work that I do, where I like being with the people that I'm with in this community that we create together in our workplace. All of those things are meaningful. And I do think that, so getting to know people is part of that sense. But in terms of the class, there's such a wide variety because government is such a big world. So the law of government class is designed to introduce you to a lot of different parts of that world. But then there are specifics. For example, if you're interested in criminal justice policy and you're passionate about that, then you want to take a criminal justice class and learn more about that system. If you're interested in state and local government classes, we have some amazing classes on those issues. There's a class that goes issue by issue in local government, talking about the things that are big in the news right now. So fracking, marijuana, COVID-19 shutdown. You know, the course will talk about how do all those issues affect local government. So you can really get a sense of what kind of issues you would engage with if you went to work in local government. Then there's elections, right? Some people are involved in that side of the process. We have a class on election law. It happens to be taught by the Secretary of the New York State Senate. So if you take election law, you'll also get a great chance to know the leading state expert on legislative procedure and what life is like working at the state Senate. So there's a lot of classes you can take. The challenge that most students struggle with is picking. And the reason why we require law of government for the fellows and encourage it for other people interested in government is that I'm trying to cram in as much of that information early on as I can, because I know that's when many people are seeing the two roads diverging in the yellow wood and wondering which path they should take. So classes are going to be an important way of studying that. And if you're thinking about going to work for an agency, you have to take administrative law at the risk of not knowing anything about what they're doing. And that'll give you a good sense. But really, the truth is that all of these things play a role. And unfortunately, there's no way to know by the end of your third semester whether government is right for you. What I hear very, very often from, we ask all of our guest speakers, you know, if they have any advice for students. And the advice always has to do with the next thing you do, never with the thing you ultimately want to get to, because careers are just not linear. People find a thing that excites them, that they're passionate about, and they pursue that thing. And that's what leads them to the next thing that they're passionate about. And so you may want to decide whether government's right for you, but it also may be a question of deciding whether environmental law is right for you, or whether this specific agency that you've never even heard of is a fantastic opportunity, and you're going to see where it takes you.
Ava, can I maybe just add something quickly for?
Please, yeah.
Just because I'm hearing a bit of a theme, and I just want to sort of loop it back into some of the other things that we often talk about with incoming students that they're trying to make their decisions. And I think the theme that you're hearing from Professor Ayers, and that I want to reinforce for everyone, is that you're going to be in touch with an absurd amount of mentors and contacts and networks that will help you explore all of these different avenues. And it doesn't have to be an intro to government class to help you determine if you want to do government. Your 1L coursework, although it's not going to be all government law, you're going to get so much information for which sorts of classes and people and experiences you're gravitating to, how you interact with and interpret and work with the law. And each of the courses is intended to be a vehicle to explore the law in a different kind of way. So I just want to encourage you all to stay open, be these sponges, know what things you're sort of interested in so you'll engage those people in those conversations, but definitely just be open and know that even if it doesn't specifically say, this is going to interest me, or it's going to teach me about either, you know, if it's government, if it's criminal law, whatever your interests might be, all of the other things you're encountering will also feed that conversation. So we're going to put you in touch with alumni, career counselors, upper class student mentors, faculty mentors. You're going to have all of those people over the summer in orientation and onward. So don't get pressured by you have to find the one thing. Know that all of the things are going to be collectively put together. You have a lot of mentors that are going to help you put those pieces together so that you're weaving a pathway that ultimately leads to things that you want to do. So I just wanted to kind of broaden that a little bit to drive home that message.
Absolutely. I mean, your first year classes really are going to help you, because you'll learn about what it's like to think about different things that lawyers think about. Right? Doing work with judicial cases is very different from doing work with statutes that are passed by the legislature. It just feels different on your brain as you're reading them. It's a different kind of intellectual challenge. and different areas of law feel different to you. So you'll, in your first year classes, you'll get a lot of exposure to ideas about what's it like to represent a client versus what's it like to think about things in a more abstract way as you would in policy. So by the end of your first year, you'll have a lot of ideas. And the other part, just to stress what Amy said, the informal mentoring is really key. So first year students come to me, again, GLC fellows or not GLC fellows, and say, I think I might be interested in government. And I say, great, let's talk about your interests. And I encourage them and I give them names of people to go talk to for informational interviews. If they're shy, I'll send the email myself and introduce you, that's fine. And all of the professors here are willing to do that. And I happen to be the director of the Government Law Center, but a lot of our faculty have great connections to government and would be happy to do the same for you. So first year is a great time to explore informally as well as through your classes. Let's see, another question I just see real quick. When can I start applying to the Government Law Center Fellowship Program? That application will be available soon, but you absolutely don't have to do it until your first week of classes. So it's fine to wait until the summertime. And we always keep some seats open in the fellowship until the first week of classes. So we may make people offers earlier than that, but the more experience I get with this, the later I wait to let people know about their invitation to the fellowship, because it's really important to me that nobody miss a chance. And it's wonderful that you all are on this information session, and I try to reach out to admitted students to talk about it as much as possible. But it's really not until you've arrived on campus that I can be sure that you've had a fair chance to apply. And when we put the class of fellows together, just to anticipate a question some people ask, I don't look at grades. There's a committee. We don't look at grades. The fellowship is not designed to be academically competitive, because we want to help people who will benefit from the program. And that includes the students at the top of the class and the students at the bottom of the class. In fact, the students at the bottom of the class can maybe use a little more help, so that's who we focus on, to the extent that we have that choice. But I don't ever find out what your grades look like when I see your application. What I see is a short essay that you wrote, and essay sounds like more than it is. It's really a page or less, which talks about mainly what you hope to get out of the fellowship. And what I'm looking for there is, we want to put together a class that's going to form a core of a community on campus that's interested in government, people who will reach out to their fellows to help them to build that community. But also, we want people who don't know yet. For the first year, people who think they might want to go into government, that's who benefits from all this exposure, right? People who need help making their choice. It's also nice to have some people who are embedded in government already, who already have that knowledge and skill set, because that makes for a wonderful group, right? The students who have more experience can help teach and mentor the students who have less. And the students who have less experience can help the experienced students by asking them questions. There's a saying in Zen, in the expert's mind, there are no questions, but in the beginner's mind, there are many. I actually mangled that expression, forgive me, but the point is, beginners are in a wonderful position to teach the experts by asking them questions that the experts wouldn't have thought of. So we form a community that way. And what we're really looking for is just people to help us see how we can help the students better through that application process. Okay, oh, I see there's another question I didn't address. Do you find that GLC or Albany Law alumni are easily able to find full-time jobs in the state or federal government after graduation? A couple things on that. I mean, in general, we're very successful in placing students in government. In fact, we're among the top 10 law schools in percentage of our student body that goes into government, and our overall placement rate has been really good. So in my experience of students that I've worked with, yeah, the students who are looking for jobs in government generally succeed in finding them. Certainly not everybody gets the job that they want, but the people I know who've been interested in government have generally found a path there. Something that I think is really important to think about right now is that this COVID-19 shutdown is pretty clearly going to have profound effects on the economy and on the job market in ways that I'm sure you're all thinking about. In times of economic crisis, government is one of the fields that certainly can be affected. I mean, but but it's more normally affected in terms of hiring freezes rather than losing positions. Government is always going to be there. The government is going to be needed and funded in times of economic crisis. No matter how bad it gets, there's going to be a government. So I think this is a really good time to be thinking about public service. And it's also a really exciting time to make a difference in public service. Right? People always need government to do its job well. But there are certainly needs in times like this that are going to be new and surprising and rewarding to be able to help work to meet. So I think this is an extraordinarily good time to think about government. And it's true that, economically that has an effect on, the Albany area. Just to speak about if you're not from Albany, it's a great place to live. I say this as somebody who grew up here. Nobody wants to move back to Albany less than somebody who grew up there. What could be less cool than moving home? I was very reluctant, and then I moved here and was surprised to find that I love it, and actually never want to leave. So my adolescent rebellion wore off, and I think
guilty. I do the same thing.
Right. Yeah, we're unusual in that way, but it's faculty true. Anyway, since I only have a couple of minutes left, are there other questions I can talk about? I want to be sure, and I want to say, just if you're thinking about asking a question, you're very welcome to reach out to me afterwards. I'm happy to talk one-on-one with anybody who has questions. Just shoot me an email and we'll find a time to get together. So don't feel like this is your last chance, but I would welcome any questions you have.
And I do also want to just give a quick plug. Next week on May 5th, we're doing a career services session. And then on the 6th, we're doing a sort of living in Albany, and even Mayor Sheehan, who is an alumna, as well as a member of our board of trustees, Albany's Mayor Sheehan, she will be in the living and learning session as well. So if you do want to get more of a flavor of sort of what it's like to sort of live and operate in the community that is Albany in the Greater Capital District, then that's a good one for you as well.
Great. Oh, great. Oh, great. So you see Chris Colton put my email address in the chat. Please feel very free to reach out. Is there anything else I can answer for people? I'd be happy to if there are.
And I want to say thank you, Professor Ayers, for your time today and for all of the helpful information. And thank you to everybody for attending. This is one of the most exciting times of year for us when we get to meet the brand new crop of new lawyers. And it's part of why I do admissions work, is because I always love that new school year feel, and I get to forever live in that energy of being excited to sort of explore the brand new world. So we really are here for you. We want to hear what it is to know, and we hope that you'll attend some more of our sessions. And if they're not hitting the nail on the head, then please tell us which sessions you do want to hear, because we're really happy to put it together for you. So thanks so much for everybody for attending today.
Oh, wait, I did have one question for Professor Ayers. I want to know what the drawings were that ended up being drawn that we needed to sharpen the pencils for.
Oh, Violet, do you want to? Where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Okay, so here's Violet.
Hello. I only have half of one right now, but I'll show you a different one.
Okay.
If I can get to the beginning of my notebook.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive in a short time. I couldn't do that all day.
And this one, Violet,
cute.
for our healthcare providers.
So sweet.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Good job.
Thanks, Violet. All right. Thanks, everybody. And if you're here and on FaceTime, you'll see photobombing from my daughters from time to time. That's one of my students look forward to it in their life. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Take good care.
All right. Thanks for attending, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.